After her estranged father dies, Lola inherits the quiet house she grew up in, and finds a locked door in the basement no one ever mentioned. What waits behind it isn't just a room. It's a truth that rewrites her childhood, her memories, and the man she thought she knew. Some family secrets are buried. Others are carefully preserved. Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Lola always said her father moved like a ghost, but not in the romantic way some daughters describe their distant parents. Not a war hero, not a tortured artist, not some secret dreamer. Just faint. He was a man of pressed slacks, neutral ties, and 6 p.m. dinners in silence. He smelled like lemon soap and old radiator heat. He never raised his voice, not once in 29 years, but something about the air around him discouraged questions. Thomas Dale wasn't cruel. He was an absence arranged to look like a man. He worked for a logistics division. Whatever that meant, some obscure government thing in the city. He'd leave at exactly 6:42 each morning and return by 5:58, as if his schedule were part of the house itself. Every month, he gave Lola a white envelope with a few $100s and a handwritten list. Groceries, rent, utilities, no extras. It was never cold, never unfair, just mechanical. As a child, Lola tried to win his attention with drawings, with science fair ribbons, once even a broken wrist from climbing the maple in their yard. His response had been careful, measured. Ice, splint, insurance card. No panic, no anger, no warmth. At 13, she stopped trying. By 17, she left home in silence. Now, a decade later, she was back in the house, the same too-quiet kitchen, the dull tick of the wall clock still marking out time like a metronome. The funeral had been small. A handful of colleagues she didn't recognize. A plain black suit in a closed casket. He hadn't wanted a eulogy. The will was even shorter. To Lola Dale, I leave the house and all its contents. She stood in the entryway now, holding a cardboard box, unsure whether to cry or clean. Outside, the wind dragged brittle leaves across the porch. Inside, the radiator clanked once and fell silent. The house smelled exactly as she remembered. Lemon dust and something just beneath it. Something metallic. She told herself she'd only stay for a week. But even then, something about the silence felt like it was waiting for her. The house had a certain gravity to it, not emotional weight. Lola wasn't sentimental, but a pull, like thick air pressing gently on her skin. She'd forgotten how still it was, how the walls seemed to absorb sound rather than reflect it. She started in the living room. A quick sweep for personal items turned up almost nothing. No framed photos, no worn books, no tucked-away treasures in drawers. Just manuals, insurance policies, 3 remotes in perfect alignment, and a television that still worked but hadn't aged well. The most human thing she found was a yellowing Sudoku booklet with every puzzle completed in pencil. No eraser marks. It was like her father had lived around the house, not in it. By the second day, she was deeper into the rhythm of sorting. Trash, donate, keep. It was numbing work, which she liked. Something about the structure calmed her nerves. The kitchen cupboards were so precisely arranged it made her stomach tighten. Expired canned goods in alphabetical order. Dozens of unused dishcloths, each folded like a flag. A notepad on the fridge with a single entry from last year. Sodium low, check levels. On the third day, she entered his study, the only room she'd rarely been allowed in. As a child, She'd imagined it was filled with top-secret folders and red phones that blinked. Instead, it was sad in its simplicity. A desk, a filing cabinet, a lamp. No family photos. No mug. Just a row of black binders and an old, humming desktop computer with a password she'd never guess. Then she found it. Inside the hollow of an old, hollowed-out copy of Moby Dick, there was a key. Small, rusted, unlabeled. She held it in her palm, cold and heavier than it looked, and instantly she remembered a door. The basement, back past the water heater and the old paint cans. There had been a locked door there for as long as she could remember. As a kid, she'd asked once what was behind it. Storage, her father had said. When she asked why it was locked, he just looked at her, his expression flat. Some things stay locked. She hadn't asked again. But now, alone in the quiet of his perfectly calibrated absence, the key pressed against her skin like a whisper. That door had waited her whole life. And tonight, she would open it. The basement had always felt colder than it should have. Not the kind of cold you could blame on stone or air vents. This was a deeper kind, like the walls had stopped trying to remember warmth. Lola descended the stairs slowly, flashlight in one hand, the rusted key gripped in the other. Her boots echoed off the concrete as she passed the boxes labeled ZMAZ and old papers. Untouched, probably for decades. The house above had been sterile. This space felt forgotten. Then she saw it, tucked behind an old shelving unit. The door. It was matte gray, steel, with no markings. No signs of scratches or tampering. Just clean, solid metal. As though it had always been waiting for a key no one else knew existed. Her breath caught as she stepped forward. The key fit perfectly. The lock clicked once. The sound was sharper than expected, too loud in the silence. Lola paused, one hand on the handle. Some part of her expected alarms, some security measure or trap. But when she pushed the door open, there was only a long, narrow hallway, lit dimly by a string of overhead bulbs, half of them dead, the rest flickering like tired eyes. The floor was linoleum, aged and curling at the edges. The walls were covered in acoustic foam panels, black and porous like scorched honeycomb. It was quiet, aggressively so. Her footsteps made no echo. Even her breath felt dampened, like the air swallowed it whole. At the end of the corridor was another door. This one was numbered. 6. Just a metal number plate, bolted into the center. Room 6. Lola pushed it open. The room inside was sterile. 4 white walls. A bolted steel chair, padded at the seat and arms. A small, round drain embedded in the center of the tiled floor. A mounted camera, unplugged. A folding desk in the corner. A box beside it filled with VHS tapes, each marked in her father's tight, angular handwriting. Daniel, Mark, Eloise, Jacob, Claire. No last names. No dates. She crouched beside the box, fingers hovering over the tapes. Something about the drain bothered her most of all. The slight discoloration around its edges, a stain not quite gone. It reminded her of old rust or old blood, dulled by years. Lola sat down slowly on the floor, surrounded by dust and silence. Her father had been no one. No stories, no drama, no emotional flair. And yet this room, this impossible, surgically quiet room, had been beneath her feet all along. Lola didn't watch the first tape right away. She carried the box upstairs like it might bite, set it on the coffee table, and spent an hour just staring at it, sipping cold tea that had long since stopped being drinkable. Her hands were restless, curling and uncurling in her lap. The weight of the tapes wasn't physical. It pressed on the space around her like humidity before a storm. She found her father's old VHS player tucked neatly behind the television. Of course it still worked. The remote had fresh batteries. She chose a tape at random. No reason. The spine read, "Jacob." She slid it in. The screen flickered. Static. Then the soft hum of a camera. The image cleared. The same white room. Same walls. Same drain. A boy sat in the steel chair. Maybe 18, maybe younger. Lean but not sickly. He was blinking slowly, like he'd just woken up from a long nap. There was a bandage over his left eyebrow. His wrists weren't tied, but the chair had built-in restraints that had clearly been used. Off-screen, her father's voice spoke. Calm, even. The voice she remembered from bedtime instructions and grocery lists. "Jacob, are you awake?" The boy nodded slowly. "Do you remember why you're here?" Jacob looked around. His voice was raw. "No, that's all right. We're going to talk for a bit." What followed wasn't an interrogation. Not exactly. There were no accusations, no mention of crimes or threats. Just questions. How often do you lose time? What do you see in the mirror when you're tired? When was the last time you felt real? Jacob answered in broken thoughts, often confused. Sometimes he cried. Once he laughed at nothing. And through it all, Thomas Dale never raised his voice, never showed a flicker of cruelty. It was the calmness that chilled Lola the most. The practice in his tone. The tape ran for nearly an hour. At the end, Jacob asked, "Can I go home now?" There was a pause. Then her father said, "We'll see how you are in the morning." The screen cut to static. Lola ejected the tape with shaking fingers. She sat still for a long time, the room pressing in around her. Her father hadn't been a jailer. He hadn't screamed or hit or tortured, at least not on tape. No, he had observed, and somehow, that was worse. The house felt smaller now. Every corner, every drawer, every silent appliance seemed to hum with a quiet suspicion. The once neutral order of her father's world had shifted, become performative, unnatural. Cleanliness as camouflage. Lola didn't sleep that night. She watched a second tape. Claire. And then a third. All the same room. Different faces. Men, women. Even a girl who couldn't have been older than 15. All confused. All compliant. All alone. All of them, somehow, known by her father. She returned to the basement the next morning, light slanting through the single dirt-crusted window near the ceiling. This time, she examined everything. There wasn't much to room 6 beyond its purpose. But behind the folding desk, behind a false panel in the wall she only noticed because of a faint, perfect seam, she found a slim compartment. Inside, a leather-bound notebook, dark green. No title. The leather was worn along the spine, corners softened by use. It wasn't locked. It didn't need to be. She opened it. The handwriting was neat. Always neat. Name, date in, assessment, outcome. Page after page. Entries scrawled in his narrow, clinical hand. Mark, December 4th, 03. Erratic, lucid during interview, neutralized. Eloise, January 29th, 05. High responsiveness, compliant, released. Claire, August 17th, 08. Repeating phrases, likely triggered, neutralized. Every line was like a nail driven into wood. Then, halfway through the book she saw it. Eric Weller, October 2nd, 07. Resistant, claimed false memory pattern neutralized. Her chest locked up. Eric. He had been her friend. The weird kid in 7th grade who said strange things, believed in ghosts, tried to teach her about lucid dreaming. He went missing during fall break. Everyone assumed he ran away. His parents moved a year later. No body, no trace, and her father had written his name like it was a lab rat. Lola sat down hard on the floor, the notebook still open in her lap. This wasn't a secret hobby. This wasn't twisted curiosity. This had been a system, a methodical sorting of people her father had deemed unstable, unusual, threats. She turned the page and kept reading, her eyes dry and burning. The last recorded entry was dated September 2016. After that, only blank pages, until she reached the very last page. There in a smaller, slightly messier hand, Lola, ongoing. No date, no notes, just her name. She stared at it, the letters swimming. She could still hear his voice from the tapes. Calm, patient, in control. Suddenly, she wasn't sure what she remembered from her childhood, and what had been made to seem like remembering. Lola didn't leave the house for 2 days. She ate toast she didn't taste, stared through windows without seeing. The tapes stayed in their box, untouched. She kept the ledger wrapped in a towel beneath her bed, as if hiding it would blunt its sharpness. But the name, her name, etched in that final page wouldn't let her rest. She began with the only tool she trusted more than memory: search. Her father didn't exist online. No social media, no professional profiles. Just a handful of government mentions buried in old tax filings, and a few dry references in local records. Every photo of him looked the same. Stiff posture, flat gaze, wearing a tie no one could remember him taking off. But when she searched the names in the ledger, not all, just a few cautiously, things began to line up. Some were missing persons, filed across state lines. Some had obituaries with vague causes. Undisclosed illness, found deceased in home. Others had no records at all, like they'd vanished long before the internet tried to keep track of people. But it was the patterns that haunted her. They weren't random. Most of the victims had been vulnerable in some way. Loners, eccentric thinkers, people with inconsistent stories or fringe beliefs. People who didn't fit, who'd been labeled disturbed or troubled, and every one of them had crossed through the same regions over the last 30 years. Counties, cities, transit hubs that formed a rough perimeter around Thomas Dale's assignments. It was like he'd built a net, a careful, invisible web. And when someone landed in it, room 6, the worst part was, there was no trail of punishment, no court records, no trials, not even a whisper of suspicion. Whoever he had been, whatever he had done, it had gone unnoticed. Or worse, accepted. That thought chilled her more than the room ever had. On a dark forum buried beneath a layer of encrypted blogs, she found a thread. The man without rank. A decades-old urban legend whispered by survivors of black site programs and failed conspiracy groups. Descriptions varied, but one name kept surfacing. A man in a gray suit who didn't work for any agency you could name. A man who asked about memory, time loss, altered perception. He called himself a researcher. Others called him the recorder. Lola sat back, heart in her throat. There was even a sketch, uploaded in 2009. She didn't want it to look like him, but it did. She waited until after midnight. Something about the hour felt right. Like the air around the house loosened after dark, like the walls were willing to breathe again. Lola sat cross-legged on the floor of the living room, the tape in her lap heavier than its plastic should allow. It was unlabeled. No name, no date, just black plastic and the weight of anticipation. Her fingers trembled as she slid it into the VHS player. The machine clunked word and hissed. Then the screen bloomed to life. The room. Always the room. She almost expected to see another stranger. Someone broken, someone unmoored. But it wasn't a stranger. It was her. 7, maybe 8 years old. Her hair in a single braid, wearing a t-shirt with faded stars and a pair of mismatched socks. She was sitting on the floor of room 6, cross-legged like now, a coloring book open in front of her, crayons scattered around her like evidence. Her small voice carried faintly. "Do you want me to draw you one?" Off-screen, her father's voice answered. "Just keep going. You's read this time." Young Lola nodded and carefully picked the crayon. The camera zoomed slightly, not on the picture, on her face, her eyes, her expressions, her reactions. She flipped a page, began to draw. Her father spoke again, quieter now. Not to her. To the tape? To someone else? Subject 8. Baseline behavior. Calm. Responds to indirect suggestion. No aggression. Imagination remains high. She paused, looked directly at the camera. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart. Is this for work?" "Yes." "Okay." She smiled and continued drawing. The screen flickered. Static crept in along the edges, curling like frost. When the picture cleared, she was gone. The room was empty. The chair had been moved slightly. The coloring book lay abandoned on the floor, a red smear across the page. Then her father appeared in frame. He bent down, picked up the book, and thumbed through it slowly, murmuring something too faint to hear. Then clearly, "Control test complete. Memory will reset within 72 hours. He looked at the camera directly for the first time in any tape, and smiled. It wasn't malicious. That's what made it worse. It was proud. The screen went black. Lola sat in the stillness of the room, the tape still warm in the machine. She could feel it now, small gaps in her childhood, memories that didn't fully anchor, certain smells she never knew the source of. Her aversion to crayons, her recurring dreams of drains. She hadn't just grown up above room 6. She'd been part of it. Morning came without color. The light through the windows felt brittle, like it could snap against the glass. Lola hadn't slept. She tried, closed her eyes, counted backwards, recited song lyrics from middle school. But her mind replayed that last tape, over and over, like a loop stuck in the projector. She made coffee, poured it, forgot to drink it. Her phone buzzed once. A bank notification. Reality. Knocking politely. The tapes were still on the floor. The ledger lay open beside them, her name silently whispering from its final page. Upstairs, in the room she'd grown up in, the closet still held the pink sweater she couldn't remember ever wearing. She could walk away. That thought stayed with her all morning. She could burn the tapes, box up the evidence, file her father away as just another reclusive man with secrets. The world wouldn't miss him. No one was asking questions. Not now. Not ever. But she couldn't unknow what she knew. She couldn't unsee what had been done to her, and to others, in silence, beneath the skin of an ordinary life. By late afternoon, she had made her choice. She gathered the tapes, not all, just enough, loaded them into a bag, wrapped the ledger in an old hoodie, and pulled on her jacket. She didn't call the police. Instead, she drove 3 hours north to a journalist's house, a name she'd found scrawled once in the margins of her father's books. Someone who had written about unmarked programs and black site disappearances back when no one cared. The woman opened the door cautiously, and when Lola handed her the bag, she said only, "I don't want to be anonymous, but I also don't want to be anyone's victim." Then she walked away. That night, back at the house, she opened room 6 one final time. It smelled the same, looked the same, but it no longer held any mystery, just history. And history can be torn down. She poured gasoline in silence. Across the drain, the walls, the chair. She lit the match. It burned slow at first, like the house was resisting. But then the fire caught, and with it, the weight began to lift. Not gone, not completely, but shifting, turning, becoming something she could hold without it hollowing her out. Lola watched from the lawn until the flames swallowed the door, until room 6 no longer existed in the world. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned,